So hello everyone. Today I will be explaining what is a firewall, how it protects the networks, its history, the types, and then its features and its best practices, and also limitations together with the advantages and disadvantages of the firewall. So let's go. Okay, so what is a firewall? It's a network security device that monitors incoming and outgoing traffic and decides whether to allow or block specific traffic based on defined set of security rules. Firewalls have been the first line of defense in network security for over 25 years. So as we know, firewall is the first line of defense and humans are the last line of defense. So being firewall being the first line of defense, it makes sure that it goes through all the packets and it works together with other equipment, things like IPS and LTM, ASM and whatnot. But then firewall is one of the most utmost important things to have in a security infrastructure. So it is a known fact that almost all organizations will have a firewall one way or the other. Okay. So how firewall protects a network is it sets a border between our private network or any network and the external network. Each data packet entering or exiting from your network is scanned and checked against the pre-configured rules. So the firewall establishes the malicious and safe content once the inspection is over. So like you said earlier, it has pre-configured rules where we will tell what is allowed and what is not allowed. So usually the best practices is to just follow the industry standard, but then you can also have specific cases of rules set where you can do literally anything that you like, where you can like prevent file types, or you can what they call quarantine the file types for later inspection. So the possibilities are endless, but as we can see, a firewall is a very important security device that is needed. Yeah, so like everything in the world, firewall also has its own history, and it came out, the first version came out in the 1980s, and in total up to date there are 5 generations of firewall, which I'll be explaining in a while. And also there are to this date there are new ones, not generations, but then new types and more advanced threat detection capabilities coming in firewall, which I'll explain later. So firstly is generation 1 firewalls, which is also known as antivirus protection. This consisted of antivirus protection designed to stem the proliferation of viruses invading PCs in the 1980s. Like we know in 1980s there were not really people, they didn't have that much for security security defense tools. So actually even the things like rats and rootkits were unknown and unheard of. But then after it started popping up from the attacks from like in the US and for let's say like in Russia and stuff like that, this thing was just when the first generation of firewalls came up, mainly to focus on antivirus protection. Then next, generation 2 firewalls for network protection. In the mid 1990s, physical firewalls had to be created to protect large networks and technically just any organization. The next is a generation 3 firewalls for applications. In the early 2000s, firewalls were developed to address vulnerabilities in applications, so it went more deep and more better threat detection. So next is generation 4 firewalls, which are brought into the picture for payloads. So these firewalls, developed around 2010, were designed to address evasive and polymorphic attacks. And the next, generation 5 is firewalls are large scale protection. Around 2017, large scale attacks using new and more complex methods necessitated advanced threat detection and prevention solutions. So around the time of like 2010 to 2015, as we can see earlier, things like Zeus, WannaCry all started coming and invading our personal space. And also around 2017, like that was when malware like what they call the one that hit the Saudi Aramco, like Stuxnet and stuff like that, were coming into the picture, which were very huge and had a lot of impact, which could have literally stopped nations from proceeding forward and even could have killed people. So that is why firewalls became more in-depth and became a very important defense tool that is needed for all organizations. And now, as of in the time of making this video in 2023, there's something called NGFW, which is known as the next generation firewall, which is so good that it can detect traffic coming from the places like Tor and places like from what they call Tails, and using the Tails operating system, which is known for privacy and stuff. It can literally they can define which traffic is legitimate and which traffic is coming from Tor, Mixnet, and stuff like that. Okay, so as we know, there are not many types of firewall, but then quite a number of firewalls we can have in different places, like the web application firewall, hardware firewall, and stuff like that, physical firewall and stuff. So what I mean. But then generally, yeah, there are two general types, which is one network firewall and host-based firewall. So in the earlier days, firewalls were divided into two camps, proxy and stateful, and over time stateful inspection became more sophisticated and the performance of proxy firewalls became too slow because the attacks were becoming more sophisticated and whatnot. Okay, so the first, let me start off with the host-based firewall. A host-based or computer firewall protects just one computer or host, generally just one agent, and are typically deployed on home or personal devices, often coming packaged with the operating system. Occasionally, though, these firewalls can also be used in corporate settings to provide an added layer of protection. Considering the fact that host-based firewall must be installed and maintained individually on each device, the potential for scalability is quite limited. So some of it is like Microsoft Defender and stuff like that. So next is firewall networks. So these firewall networks protect all devices and traffic passing a demarcation point, enabling broad scalability. As the name implies, network firewall functions at the next network level, the OSI level 3 and layer 3 and layer 4, and scanning traffic between external sources and your local area network LAN, or traffic moving between different segments inside the network. They are placed at the perimeter of the network or the network segment as the first line of defense and monitor traffic by performing deep packet inspection and packet filtering. If the content of the packets do not meet previously selected criteria based on the rules that the network administrator or security team has created, the firewall rejects and blocks the traffic. So as we know, that's how a firewall works, and it usually just depends on the rule. So if the rule is set such a way that is not set such a way that is a limitation, or is not set properly, or there's no rule at all implying a particular type of packet to be blocked, firewall will not block it and let it pass by. So we have to always make sure the rules we are going through is up to industry standards and is updated accordingly. So like I said earlier, there are a few other types of firewall that need to be but then also exist. So some of them are packet layer, circuit level, application layer, proxy server, and software firewall. So I'll be explaining the 5 here now. Packet layer analyzes traffic in the transport protocol layer. At the transport protocol layer, applications can communicate with each other using the protocols, the TCP protocol or the UDP protocol, either known as transmission control protocol and user datagram protocol. The firewall examines the data packets at this layer, looking for malicious code that can infect the network or the device. If a packet is identified as a potential threat, the firewall gets rid of it. So the three-way handshake, the SYN ACK, and all the handshake methods all will be checked by the packet layer firewall to see whether it's being hijacked or is it being man-in-the-middle attack or anything like that in that particular agenda. Okay, so next is the circuit level, which a firewall at the circuit level is positioned as a layer between the transport layer and the application layer of the TCP IP protocol. So thus they work at the session layer of open systems interconnection OSI model. In the TCP model, before information can be passed from one cyber entity to another, there needs to be a handshake. So like I said earlier, the handshake, three-way handshake, a circuit level firewall examines the data that passes during the handshake. So and the information in the data packets can alert a firewall to potentially harmful data, and the firewall can then discard it before it infects another computer or system. So next is the application layer, which makes sure that only valid data exists at the application level before allowing it to pass through. This is accomplished through a set of application specific policies that allow or block communications being sent to the application or those the application sends out. So next is the proxy server that captures and examines all the information going into or coming out of a network. A proxy server acts like a separate computer between your device and the internet. It has its own IP address that your computer connects to. as information comes in or goes out of the proxy server, it is filtered and harmful data is caught and discarded. So technically all work in the same way, but they just have a little bit of differences to their specificity. So next is software firewalls, which is most common kind of firewall can be found on most personal computers. Like I said, the types of what they call Microsoft Defender and whatnot. It works by inspecting data packets to get flow to and from your device. The information in the data packet is compared against a list of threat signatures. If a data packet matches the profile of a known threat, it will be discarded. So usually it's all there for 0 days is technically not impossible, but then it usually 0 days are not able to be blocked by firewall, because as the name stands, it's a 0 day. But then packets that are known or anything like that, or has been rules set in place to prevent it, will be blocked and discarded by the firewall. So yeah. So like every network devices, let it be a router, let it be a WAF, or anything for that matter, security or anything device like that, you know that it has multiple features. So a firewall consists of a hardware and software that combine and protect a section of a network from unwanted data. Hardware firewall runs software installed inside it, and the software firewall use your computer as the hardware device to run on. Whether you have your own firewall or managed firewall run by a firewall as a service SWAS vendor, components will be similar. So here are some of the features or the characteristics or the technologies that are inside firewall. So if one is firstly is a real-time monitoring, which checks the traffic as it enters the firewall. Next is IP, Internet Protocol packet filtering, which examine the data packets. And then next is the proxy servers, like I explained earlier, serve as a barrier between your computer and network. And then next is the VPN, virtual private network, which is the type of proxy server that encrypts data sent from someone behind the firewall and forward it to someone else. Next is the NAT, which is known as a network address transition, that changes the destination or source address of IP packets as they pass through the firewall. In this way, multiple hosts can connect to the internet using the same IP address. Next is SOCS, which is known as socket secure server, that routes traffic to the server on the client's behalf. This enables the inspection of the client's traffic. So before before the packet actually reaches the person, it is analyzed, say in a sandbox or in a safe environment, and then only it is sent to the particular client, given that the packet is not malicious or anything like that. So next is mail relay services, which takes email from one server and delivers it to another server. This makes it possible to inspect email messages for threats. In this mail relay services, there are designated devices from, like example, from vendors like Proofpoint and stuff like that, to actually go through your email, and there's actually a third-party service. But firewall also has this, but then if you have the finances for it and your company can actually invest in it, it's always better to have an added security of having something like Proofpoint email protection and stuff like that. So next is a split domain name system, which allows you to dedicate internal usage of your network to one DNS and external usage to another. The firewall can then monitor the traffic going to each server individually. Final one is logging, which keeps on going log of the activity. This can be reviewed later to ascertain when or how threats tried to access the network or malicious data within the network attempted to get out. So in the logs, what it means is that whether what was blocked, what was allowed, what was quarantined, what was discarded, and what not. Every action that a particular firewall takes will be kept in the logging, and its retention depends on the particular vendor and how much money you are paying them. So if like say you want like 1 month or you want 1 year or like that, you would have to pay more than someone who's holding data for 6 months or having retention for about 6 months a year. So it depends individually. It depends on the particular company or the particular person who is getting the firewall. But end of the day, there are services where you can keep it how long you want, but then it's just end of the day a matter of how much you are willing to pay. Okay, so like we know, everything has plus and minuses to every situation in life. So same way is firewall has its advantages and disadvantages as well. So advantages are as follows. On security, like we know, it protects and secures our network and whatnot. Next is the control. We can control what program, application, and where people go surf and stuff like that. Next is privacy. we can prevent unauthorized access and make sure no one is snooping through our data and stuff like that. The next advantage is performance. It provides us with faster performance because we have blocked unwanted traffic and only unmalicious and safe packets actually received. So a lot of the unsafe things are filtered out. Okay, so next is compliance. Compliance says we comply with regulatory requirements and industry standards, which can prevent us from being sued for any reason, for defamation or any data being leaked or anything like that. So disadvantages are, firstly, is a false sense of security. People might think just because they have a firewall, it's impossible to be attacked and whatnot, and be like a bicycle and take it too lightly. Next is the complexity. Firewalls are quite complex and hard to configure, so it's not always the easiest thing to work with. And but then as not every principal or every vendor will be able to bring their system in and actually make it work with us. So next is compatibility, and some applications and some programs may not be able to run and be compatible with the particular vendor of firewall that we are taking. So there's that negative aspect as well. Another one thing, having a firewall is relatively quite expensive. So the easy thing understood here is chances are you paying a basic amount, you will get the best features, but then it doesn't mean that just because you're paying a very high sum, you're getting one of the best ones. That might be the case, but usually there are some people, some vendors or principals who give lower price, and actually they are the market leaders and stuff like that, which we'll go deep dive into it in a while in next few chapters. But then for now, that's one of the disadvantage. And finally is the performance. So because we have a firewall, chances are that we need to filter through the packets. Some might be quarantined, some might be discarded and stuff like that. So it may now slow down our performance because some legitimate packets may be blocked or maybe not allowed for maybe what reason may not know. But then sometimes it may be a pain, but in all, the performance isn't really affected that much. Can be looped through, can be what they call it, can be successfully be navigated. But then again, it may, some cases, it's not always, but it may in some cases give a bad performance for us in a working sense, that it may drag our time and whatnot. As we know, there are industry protocols, not necessarily protocols, but then parts or something like best practices where we all follow because it's been tested out and proven time and time again, which actually work and help to ensure we secure our network. Okay, so for firewall as well, there are best practices, not for rules and whatnot, setting up rules and how to monitor and stuff like that. All so. I will be explaining the few firewall best practices which we can follow so that we can prevent any attacks and know, because not everyone has a mentor or someone who there are many companies, actually there are a lot of companies who are just coming into cybersecurity and don't have enough professionals. So here are some of the best practices which we can follow in order to make our firewall more secure and get the best out of it. So first is blocking traffic by default. When you block traffic by default, all traffic is prevented from entering network at first. Now, any specific traffic headed towards known safe services is allowed to. So technically means that we block every port, we block all type of traffic, so that in order we only know the legitimate traffics, and from there we can start, so that it's better known as least trust, zero trust, where we don't trust any type of packet and extract the ones that we actually trust, so and we know it's legitimate. Next is specify the source IP address, destination IP address, and destination port. So when we specify the source IP address, we can eliminate the possibility of getting malicious traffic coming from directly from IP addresses that are known to present threats. By specifying the destination IP address, we can also protect devices or those that share a certain IP address. Specifying a destination port can protect processes that receive data through certain destination ports, such as databases, which may be targeted by structured query language injections meant to temper the queries that applications make to databases. So if you know that usually the ports usually left open are the ones like 443 for HTTPS, 80 port 80 for HTTP and stuff like that, which we know is legitimate and is needed to be open for traffic to come in. And then when you have ports for like RDP, shouldn't be open, and ports for SSH and stuff like that shouldn't be open, because we know that can be utilized by attackers to take a leverage on our system. So next is updating firewall software regularly. So with regular software updates, we know we can prevent threats and usually stuff like that. So why the update in any case is always important, because there will be always 0 days, and knowing the fact that even we get frustrated with 0 days, for sure firewall vendors and principals, they too get frustrated, so they release a patch as soon as possible, or not they will at least tell which port to close and which port to monitor for the particular 0 days. So the best way in that is always to update our firewall software, so that we are secured accordingly, and the money we are paying to the principal and whatnot is not going down the drain. So next is conduct regular firewall software audits. So this is to ensure that they are managing and filtering traffic the way they need to. This reduces the risk as well as ensures your system is meeting regulatory and internal requirements. So you don't want to pay like quite a huge sum only to not get the bigger piece of the pie. So you know what I mean. So the best is just to go and have software audits, so that you are getting the best bang for your buck. Okay, so next is I have a centralized management tool for multi-vendor firewalls. So you can see the status of and make changes to different firewalls from disparate vendors all within a single dashboard. In this way, you can check and see how each one is performing and make adjustments as needed without having to navigate through several screens or travel to different workstations. So having like for example, vendors like Checkpoint have their own firewall, in which we just have to go through the link, and into the link we put in our credentials, and we just have to proceed from there with prior a few other given other layer security. But then they have their IP which is given to us, which we go and there we can manage and stuff like that one. So the best is to, because we know 0 days can happen anytime, any business can happen anytime, so we want to make it as accessible as possible. So when you're choosing a firewall, make sure that you go through with the vendor or the principal and ask them, do they have a centralized management tool? So if chances are they don't have a centralized management tool, it's not the best way forward. So yeah. Okay, so firewall has its limitations as well, because it's not a fully perfect device or feature, something security feature. We spoke earlier, it does has its limitations, which are disadvantages and what, but then there are 4 limitations that are not unique to a firewall in most cases. So first of it is that they can't stop users from accessing information on malicious website after the user has already been connected to the website. So chances are, if you get let's say a pop-up saying that you shouldn't visit the website, but you still proceed and say no, I want to proceed, then a firewall can't really do much. So that is more towards training, to meet human training, so that we can mitigate this. Then next, they don't protect organizations from social engineering. So if let's say a phishing email is sent which looks legitimate and very very good looking, and if let's say an internal phishing email has been sent around, there's nothing much a firewall can do, because those are authorized users. Saying if your system has already been infected, firewall cannot find the threat unless it tries to spread from across through the firewall. So if the malicious, let's say a rubber ducky or something, has been inputted into a staff's PC somewhere in maybe in a different country or something, when they went clubbing, or let's say went just out for a social drink or something like that, chances are but then it's guaranteed the firewall can't do much unless it's trying to go from one PC to another, or trying to get into the infrastructure or something like that. Aside from that, the firewall can't really do much, because once you've been attacked, once a singular device has been breached, chances are it's cannot detect it much, because it's already in there. So if before it attacks the device, a firewall can stop it. But then if it's already been they got attacked and it's already inside the particular system, nothing much can be done by the firewall. Finally, a firewall cannot prevent hackers from using stolen passwords to access sensitive areas of a network. So if, like I said again from the previous social engineering, if an attacker manages to get a PC and then get hold of a PC of, let's say, admin, security personnel, cyber security personnel, PC where this admin in the AD and gets all the passwords. Nothing much can be done by the firewall because it's just more of not really a physical security guard or something. It's just a software thing which you cannot really prevent do much if the human error involves in it. So yeah. Okay, so as you can see the diagram here, these are all the list of the firewalls that have been identified by the Gartner or the Magic Quadrant, showing that who are the leaders and whatnot. So in the leader part, you can see the Fortinet, Palo, and Checkpoint, which are very good and on a different level. I personally use Fortinet and Checkpoint, so I can guarantee and say that they are very good and on a different level. And they are also competitors like Cisco and whatnot. So this is a very good. So if you're an organization who's just trying to break into cybersecurity or just want to make a cybersecurity better in your company, you can just have a look here, which is this is released by Gartner in like every 1 year or 2 years depending on the demand and the update. So you can just go through this and know who are the ones, and keep in mind pricing will vary very much, but at the same time features will vary much. So just looking at this, you can roughly know and shortlist and just reach out to a vendor or principal to get the pricing and whatnot. So yeah, one of the last takeout from this video is that make sure if you guys are trying to get into cybersecurity, making your place more secure, a firewall is uh, without a doubt the most important one. So best is just invest in a firewall and don't expect a firewall to do much, but then do all the work. It does a lot, but then if you guys can actually set aside more income, more revenue, and more, how to say, more spending power for cybersecurity, please follow that and try to implement something like a IPS and a ransomware detector and whatnot, because a firewall alone can only do so much. But it's all a starting point, and if a starting point you ask me, the best thing to put into place will definitely be a firewall. So okay, that's all from me. Thank you.